Good afternoon. Welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 7 newspaper articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The handout for the same will be available in the description of this video for your kind perusal. Please have a look at that. The first article that we'll take up is related to India, Iran and USA, as Iran and USA held talks in Oman to curb the escalating nuclear program of Tehran. The second article is related to India and Italy relations, as the Foreign Affairs Minister of Italy is visiting India and delegation level talks sought to expand cooperation in trade, technology, defense, clean energy and the implementation of India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. Additionally, we'll take up 5 articles in the simplified which will help you in prelims and mains preparation. Now, the first article is related to India, Iran and USA. The context behind it is that Iran and USA held talks in Oman to curb the nuclear program of Iran. The stakes of these talks are so high that if these talks fail, there is a very real possibility that Iran may become a nuclear power real soon. Within 3 weeks, it can further enrich its uranium stockpile to weapons grade, and within 1 year it can manufacture a deployable nuclear weapon as well. And it has the potential of reshaping the entire West Asian geopolitics and maybe even the map of West Asia. So we will discuss the India-Iran relations, the significance of Iran, Chabahar Port, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, US-Iran developments and the way forward in this regard. This is important in GS2 under the topic Effect of Politics and Policies of Developed and Developing Countries on India's Interests and Indian Diaspora. First, let's have a look at the map of Iran. Iran shares its boundary with the Caspian Sea, Persian Gulf, Gulf of Oman. It has the ports, the Chabahar port in the Gulf of Oman, the Bandar Abbas port in the Persian Gulf near the Strait of Hormuz, which is a choke point. It also shares its boundary with Azerbaijan, Armenia, Iraq, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan and Pakistan. It has a few nuclear development facilities including at Isfahan, Natanz, Bushehr and Arak. Now first let's have a look at the significance of Iran for India. Iran and India have historical ties. Iran lied on the Silk Route through which the spices trade was carried out, and we have cultural and civilizational ties with Iran. It is also having the cultural ties in the form of the Persian influence on the Indian architecture. For example, the Persian influence on the Mughal architecture, the development and the introduction of Urdu language in India. And there is the religious link as well. For example, the Zoroastrians migrated from Iran to India. The Parsi community in India has the Iranian origin. Geostrategically, Iran is important for us because it provides us access to Central Asia, which is a mineral resource rich region, and we get access to Afghanistan as well through the Chabahar port and the Chabahar-Zahedan rail link, and further the development of Jaranj-Dilaram highway in Afghanistan by India. Politically as well, it is important for us because there is the India-Iran Friendship Treaty which was signed in 1950, and further developments took place in 2001 through the Tehran Declaration. So India-Iran ties have been friendly and cordial. Likewise, economically looking, there is a $2 billion trade annually between India and Iran. This is the data from fiscal year 2024. Also, the settlements between India and Iran are done in the Indian rupees. Likewise, a visa-free travel is also allowed between India and Iran. Plus, it is important for us for ensuring energy security of India because Iran has the second largest natural gas reserves, but we are not able to import enough oil and natural gas from Iran because of the US sanctions. The USA withdrew from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was to curb Iran's nuclear program in 2018. But USA gave the waiver to India, the waiver from sanctions to India, so that India is able to import oil and natural gas from Iran. But now President Trump has invoked the maximum pressure upon Iran. Through his maximum pressure campaign, he is imploring India to ensure that the imports from Iran for the oil and natural gas is brought down to zero, for which India is complying also. Plus, we have cultural ties in the form of the establishment of Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center in Tehran. And also, India has declared Farsi as the 9th classical language in the new educational policy. Now coming to Chabahar port specifically. Chabahar functions as a geopolitical lever, which is of immense importance for India, because India will be able to access the Central Asian region and even conduct trade further on to the Northern Europe also through the International North-South Transport Corridor. From Kandla in Gujarat and also from Mumbai in Maharashtra, there is the maritime trade link till Chabahar port. India is investing in the Shahid Beheshti port terminal in Chabahar port. The other port terminal there is Shahid Kalandri port terminal. From Chabahar, there is the rail link till Zahedan. And after that, in Afghanistan, India built the Jaranj-Dilaram highway, which is further connected to Kabul also. Now, it is important for us, the Chabahar port, because it will lower the dependence upon the Suez Canal, which is again a choke point. Therefore, India will be able to carry out trade with the Europe as well by using the land route after Iran. And we will be able to bypass Pakistan also. Because we need access to Afghanistan and the Central Asia, we will need to bypass Pakistan, as Pakistan does not allow us the land route, the access to Afghanistan directly, and even the usage of airspace is denied by Pakistan. Likewise, it will be important for us for countering China, because China has invested in the Gwadar port, which is not far from the Chabahar port. It is in Pakistan, and Chinese investment there is immense to the tune of $60 billion. And it will promote the regional trade also, again promoting trade to the Central Asian region and ensure energy security. But again, regarding the energy security, India is facing the curtailment due to the US sanctions. And it will promote the regional connectivity as well, because it will be helping in the development of the International North-South Transport Corridor. The International North-South Transport Corridor was an initiative of India, Iran and Russia to establish the maritime link from Mumbai and Kandla to Chabahar, and then on to the Caspian Sea via Iran, and further trade on to the Northern Europe via the connectivity through St. Petersburg in Russia also. And the development of the Chabahar-Zahedan rail link as well. Plus, the Chabahar port functions as an alternative to the Bandar Abbas port. The Bandar Abbas port is vulnerable to the choke point of the Strait of Hormuz. But there are certain concerns with respect to the Chabahar port development in Iran by India. One is the US sanctions waiver. India enjoyed the sanctions waiver from 2018 onwards, after the withdrawal of the USA from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. But now President Trump has signed an order which can impose sanctions upon India if it imports oil from Iran. Also, China has signed an agreement with Iran. A 25-year, $400 billion agreement between China and Iran was signed in 2021. Whereas India's investment in Chabahar is to the tune of $85 million only. And India has now committed for $120 million for the port development in Chabahar and $250 million as the credit facility. The regional dynamics has also reshaped after India and Iran had agreed for India developing the Chabahar port in Iran. The dynamics changed because USA exited from Afghanistan. And US had given the waiver to India because it had the interest in the stabilization of Afghanistan from which it was exiting. Now it has exited from there because India will be able to ensure the stabilization of Afghanistan by sending humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan, by sending aid, by sending wheat to Afghanistan, by using the route of Chabahar, Zahedan and Zaranj-Dilaram highway. And there is also competition from the alternative trade routes to the Chabahar port. For example, the establishment and development of the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. This runs through the UAE, Saudi Arabia, the rail link, and after that passing through the Mediterranean Sea and on to Europe further. and the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor is getting more emphasis. For example, the same has been agreed upon, the development of the same between India and Italy now. And also there are disruptions in the sea lanes of communication in this region. For example, the disruptions caused by the Houthi rebels in Yemen. There are other challenges also in the India-Iran relations. For example, there are security concerns. The security concerns again primarily due to the Houthi rebels in Yemen, and they are deploying the kamikaze drones and missiles upon the commercial ships, bringing down the protection, the security level of the commercial shipping in the region, which will affect the trade going to the Chabahar port as well. Plus there is the Israel angle also. The Israel wants to make sure that the Iran is not able to acquire nuclear capability. For that, it wants to conduct even the aerial strikes upon the Iranian nuclear facilities as well. And India enjoys close ties with Israel as well. Therefore, we need to balance the relations between Iran and Israel. Now, let's discuss the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was put in place in 2015 to ensure that Iran does not develop nuclear weapons. Before that, let's have a look at the nuclear facilities in Iran. Fordo serves as the Uranium Enrichment and Research Center. Natanz is also a uranium enrichment and research center. Isfahan is used for uranium conversion and manufacturing. Bushehr serves as the center for nuclear energy production, and Arak is for the production of heavy water, which is used for the uranium enrichment in Iran. Now, Iran went through a revolution in 1979. Post that revolution, it stopped the access of the International Atomic Energy Agency from the inspection of nuclear facilities in Iran. And therefore, there were accusations that Iran is developing nuclear weapons in a secret manner, in a clandestine manner, despite it being a signatory of the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The NPT sought to ensure that the nuclear capability is restricted to the P5 nations, that is the permanent 5 members of the United Nations Security Council, including USA, Russia, China, UK and France. And in 2011, there was a report of the International Atomic Energy Agency that Iran has invested in the design and development of nuclear weapons, and the sanctions were imposed upon Iran. In 2015, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was put in place as an agreement between the P5+1 nations and Iran, the P5 plus Germany and Iran. It was to curb the nuclear weapons development by Iran in exchange for the waiver of sanctions which were imposed upon Iran. What were the goals of the JCPOA? It was to extend the nuclear breakout time for Iran to more than 1 year. The nuclear breakout time means that if Iran goes wrong, or if Iran does not adhere to the commitments under the JCPOA, it should take at least 1 year for Iran to acquire the nuclear capability. And it was to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons, therefore, and to avoid regional conflict, because there are regional adversaries against Iran, for example, Israel and Saudi Arabia, and to ensure that there are no preemptive strikes. There is no arms race which happens in the West Asian region, which is already fragile. Now, what were the commitments of Iran under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action? It committed that it will halt the enrichment of uranium further to the weapons grade uranium or plutonium. It will limit the centrifuge numbers in Iran. It will limit the enrichment levels of uranium. Plus, it will convert the key nuclear facilities to civilian use, including the facilities at Fordo, Natanz and Arak. Also, it will allow the International Atomic Energy Agency to conduct inspections of the nuclear facilities in Iran. What were the commitments of the other signatories? They will be in return lifting the nuclear related sanctions, the USA, European Union and the United Nations. They will allow the export of oil from Iran, and therefore they won't impose sanctions upon those countries who are importing oil from Iran, and they will allow Iran to access the frozen assets, the assets of Iran which are there abroad outside Iran, which have been frozen as part of the sanctions. And there will be a gradual lifting of the arms and missiles embargoes after 5 years, with conditions that if Iran is continuously adhering to the commitments of the JCPOA. The enforcement mechanisms for the JCPOA were the monitoring by the IAEA. The monitoring were to be done through the quarterly reports, and there will be a joint commission which will manage the disputes and the implementation of the joint comprehensive plan of action. And in case Iran does not adhere to it, there is a mechanism of the reversal of the sanctions imposition, that the sanctions may be reinstated. Now coming to the US-Iran equation, President Trump withdrew from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2018, and after that USA reimposed the sanctions. And what did Iran do? It started breaching the limits were imposed under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The indirect talks were also conducted with Iran in Vienna under the Biden administration, but these talks proved inconclusive. Now again talks are being started between USA and Iran. What has prompted Iran to again agree to the direct talks with USA? One, it is experiencing a military pressure. It has experienced losses all around it. It has experienced loss in Syria. For example, President Bashar al-Assad is no more in power in Syria. He was an ally of Iran. The axis of resistance is weakening. The axis of resistance includes the Hamas in Gaza, the Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, the Syria, and also the Shiite armed groups in Iraq. And it is facing the economic crisis also. Because of the sanctions imposed, the countries are not importing oil from Iran, and there is the constant threat from the side of USA, the threat of taking up military action. Now, before coming to the capabilities of Iran, the current status of the uranium enrichment capabilities, let's discuss briefly the uranium enrichment process also. The natural uranium exists in the form of uranium-238. Just 0.7% of it is uranium-235 in the natural stage. And this is a fissile capable isotope, but it has to be enriched. The enrichment has different levels. The low enriched uranium has enrichment of up to 20%. This is used in the civilian reactors for the production of nuclear power. And the high enriched uranium, that is more than 20%, it can be used for development of the weapons grade uranium also, if further enrichment is done to more than 90% of the uranium-235. Therefore, it is done through the cascading of centrifuges. The centrifuges are employed for the further enrichment of uranium. Thousands are used in a cascade to progressively enrich the uranium hexafluoride. Now, what is the current status? The breakout capability of Iran. It has 60% of high enriched uranium, and that is about 90% of the work which is needed for the development of the weapons grade uranium. The current stockpile of 60% high enriched uranium is about 70 kg which Iran has, and this is enough for development of 5 to 8 warheads. And the breakout time now has reduced from almost 1 year at the time of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action to a matter of weeks now. Less than 3 weeks are needed to convert 60% high enriched uranium to 90% enriched uranium, which is weapons grade uranium. And if it goes for the full warhead development, because it needs the development of detonators, etc., it may take months if the decision is made, but still within a year it can acquire the nuclear weapon which is deployable also. Now, what are the geopolitical risks if Iran acquires the nuclear capability? One, there has been a historical precedent. There has been the accusation that Iran did the weaponization research from 1999 to 2003. Therefore, Iran can actually go through with the development of the nuclear weapon. Israel says that it will strike definitely upon the nuclear facilities in Iran if the need arises. The stance of USA has been quite strong. President Trump has claimed that if the diplomacy fails, then military action is on the table. Although the earlier administration of USA under Biden had claimed that we support talks, but they did not want to escalate. But President Trump is not afraid of escalation also. Also, there are gaps in the monitoring of the International Atomic Energy Agency because Iran restricts the access of the IAEA. And there is a significant quantity which Iran possesses for the 60% high enriched uranium also, and even 25 kg high enriched uranium per warhead will lead to a blast which will be of the level of Hiroshima, which is unacceptable. Now coming to the India-Iran ties, what can be the way forward? What can we suggest? One, we should ensure energy security by exploring alternatives. For example, the development and investment in the Tapi pipeline, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline. We can go for the setting up of preferential trade agreements. We can explore the trade agreements to bring down the import duties that we impose upon the Iranian agricultural goods and to improve the trade ties. We can invest in infrastructure in Iran. For example, we can invest in the development of the Farjad B oil and gas field in Iran. We can improve the connectivity again through the development of the international north-south transport corridor, and we can utilize the multilateral fora also. For example, engaging with Iran through platforms like BRICS and SCO, where Iran also participates. Now, there is a mains practice question as well. Iran-India relations are marked by historical ties and strategic convergences, yet they remain constrained by regional instability and global geopolitics. In this context, examine the significance of the bilateral relationship. How have the developments related to JCPOA and the Chabahar port project influenced the trajectory of the ties? Please try to write it. The next article is related to India-Italy relations. The context behind it is that the Foreign Affairs Minister of Italy is visiting India and a delegation level talks were conducted. It sought to expand the cooperation in trade, defense, clean energy, technology, and for ensuring the quick implementation of the India-Middle East-Europe economic corridor as well, which will benefit the trade ties between the two countries. So we will discuss the significance of Italy for India, the suggestions in this regard. This is important in GS2 under the topic Effect of Politics and Policies of Developed and Developing Countries on India's Interests and Indian Diaspora. First, let's have a look at the significance of Italy for India. We have had historical ties with Italy also. There are Italian port cities through which the trade was conducted from India. Again, they were part of the spice route. Also, the Italian traveler Marco Polo visited India. He traveled to India in the 13th century. So there are civilizational ties and trade ties as well. Italy is important strategically for India because it exited from the China-led Belt and Road Initiative. India has sovereignty and territorial integrity concerns with respect to the Chinese One Belt One Road initiative. Italy exited from that in 2023, and India and Italy are strategic partners now, and Italy has joined the India-led initiatives including the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative and the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor. Economically, Italy is significant for us because Italy is the fourth largest trading partner of India in the European Union. Italy has sent in the 18th largest FDI into India since 2000, and the trade between India and Italy is to the tune of $14.5 billion in fiscal year 2024. In terms of security, there is the Defense Cooperation Agreement which is put in place between India and Italy in 2023. It seeks to promote the cooperation in research, industrial cooperation, maritime domain awareness as well, because Italy is also a member of the Information Fusion Center which is there in India. And there is a joint working group which has been established on the counter-terrorism. India and Italy cooperate on various forums regarding the countering of terrorism, including the United Nations, the FATF also. The two countries conduct the joint naval exercise, PASEX, the passing exercise. There is cooperation in the Indian Ocean region and Africa in general. For example, Italy invests in Africa through the Mettei plan. Likewise, India also invests in Africa and has various initiatives with other countries also. For example, the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor. In terms of climate, again, there is cooperation because Italy has joined the India-led initiatives, including the International Solar Alliance, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, the Global Biofuels Alliance also. There is the partnership between industries, the establishment of joint ventures between the two countries. For example, the Fincantieri is partnering with the Cochin shipyard. The Electronica of Italy signed a memorandum of understanding with the Bharat Electronics Limited in the form of a joint venture. There are people-to-people ties also between India and Italy. For example, Italy accounts for almost 2 lakh people of the Indian origin. This is the second largest Indian diaspora in the European Union. The two countries also signed the Migration and Mobility Agreement 2023 to ensure smoother movement of the IT professionals between the two countries. Recently, the India-Italy Joint Strategic Action Plan 2025-2029 was also agreed upon. It has a few pillars including the promotion of the political dialogue, the regular meetings between the leaders and ministers of the two countries across various sectors will be conducted. The high-level meetings, they drive the trade, they drive the cooperation quickly. There will be annual consultation between the foreign ministers of the two countries to promote political cooperation again. To ensure cooperation in the science and technology sector, there will be the strengthening of trade in the green technologies, semiconductors, food processing sector also. And there will be collaboration in the promotion of sustainable mobility, automotives and advanced manufacturing. To promote the connectivity which will further enhance trade between the two countries, there will be focus upon the sustainable transport and the implementation of the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor. There will be early finalization of the maritime and port agreements. To promote the innovation cooperation between the two countries, the focus areas have been identified in the form of the artificial intelligence, telecom, Industry 4.0 and clean energy. Additionally, an Indo-Italian Innovation and Incubation Exchange program will be launched to facilitate the exchange of the researchers also. In the space sector, there will be cooperation between the Italian ASI and the Indian ISRO. The cooperation will be expanding across the sectors of Earth observation, heliophysics and lunar exploration. India is also going to host an Italian space delegation in mid-2025. To promote cooperation in the energy transition, there will be agreements to promote the usage of green hydrogen, biofuels, renewable energy, etc. Additionally, Italy is supporting the India-led initiatives of Global Biofuel Alliance and the International Solar Alliance. To promote defense cooperation, there will be annual meetings, annual joint defense consultative meetings. The focus will be upon the Indo-Pacific region and the defense industrial roadmaps will be put in place to promote cooperation in the defense industries also. To ensure the cooperation in the security, there will be the strengthening of the efforts in the counter-terrorism areas, cyber security and the prevention of crime. To promote the mobility and migration between the two countries, there will be pilot projects which will be put in place in various areas for the labor migration. For example, the migration of the health professionals, which Italy is in dire need of. There will be enhanced student exchange, academic exchange and the mobility of the researchers also. There will be promotion of the cultural exchange and the tourism also between the two countries. But there are certain challenges which are there between the relations of India and Italy. One challenge is the low trade. The trade value between India and Italy is less than $15 billion, whereas the China-Italy trade is $80 billion. There are some events also which lead to the decline of trust between the two countries. For example, the Enrica Lexi case. This is the case of the shooting of 2 fishermen by the Italian Marines. This case went to the Indian Supreme Court also. There was the case of Augusta Westland chopper scam. Likewise, there is the China dependency. Italy is still dependent upon China despite it exiting from the China-led One Belt, One Road, the Belt and Road Initiative in 2023. It is dependent upon China because of the global supply chains. Additionally, there is the Pakistan factor. Because Italy sells the military equipment, the military helicopters and how it is to Pakistan, it is a cause of concern for India because there is a probability that Pakistan may divert it to the non-state actors and their further use against India. And Italy is also the Achilles heel of Europe because the GDP growth rate is very less than 2%. The youth employment is very high at 30%. And the debt to GDP ratio is again very high in Italy to the tune of 133%. So what can be the way forward to improve the ties between India and Italy? One, we can align our Act East policy to the European Union's Indo-Pacific strategy so that our goals, our commitments are shared and we can cooperate in the trade sector also. India, European Union free trade agreement needs to put in place so that the non-tariff barriers which are there currently, for example, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, they are brought down. And we can leverage the multilateral fora also of which Italy is also part, for example, G20, etc. We can deepen the cultural and people-to-people ties between India and Italy. This is particularly important because Italy is going through a demographic winter. It has an aging population. India is experiencing a demographic dividend. India can send people who are in the working age to Italy, and therefore both the countries can enjoy the complementarities of each other. And we can implement the Joint Strategic Action Plan 2025-2029 effectively and quickly. There is a mains practice question as well. Discuss the significance of India-Italy relations in the current geopolitical context. Enumerate the key features of the Joint Strategic Action Plan 2025-29 and suggest measures to deepen the partnership. Please try to write it. Now, the next article is related to the genetic mapping of Indians. This is important in GS3 under the topic Achievement of Indians in Science and Technology. Before coming to the article, let's discuss a few basics regarding the genome sequencing. Genome is the entire set of DNA in the nucleus of every cell. DNA is the deoxyribonucleic acid. And this DNA contains 4 nucleobases, that is cytosine, thymine, adenine and guanine. These 4 nucleobases are bound by hydrogen bonds and thus they give rise to this double-stranded molecule structure. And every base on one strand pairs with the complementary base on the other strand, as we can observe here. The order of these base pairs and the varying lengths of these sequencing constitute the genes. And the genome consists of 3 billion such base pairs. The process of deciphering the order of the base pairs to decode the genetic fingerprint is the process of genome sequencing. Now, how is the whole genome sequencing process done? It is a laboratory procedure in which the order of the bases in the genome in an organism are determined in one process. So, this gives a very precise DNA fingerprint. And in case there is a disease outbreak, we'll be able to link one case to another. How is it done? First, the scientists take the bacterial cells from an agar plate and they treat them with chemicals that breaks them down. And therefore the DNA is released. This DNA is purified. Now this DNA is cut into short fragments of known length and they are done either by using the molecular scissors or mechanical disruption. Then the scientists make many copies of each DNA fragment using a process known as polymerase chain reaction. The pool of the fragments is generated in a PCR machine is called a DNA library. This DNA library is fed into a sequencer. The combination of the nucleotides, the ones which I mentioned, A, T, C and G, making up each individual fragment, and the DNA is determined and each result is known as the DNA read. The sequencer then produces millions of DNA reads and specialized computer programs are there. They put them together in the correct order like the pieces in a jigsaw puzzle, and this leads to the complete genome sequencing. Now coming to the article, the preliminary findings of the Genome India project have been released. The Genome India project studied 10,000 healthy unrelated Indians who were borrowed from 83 population groups in India. This initiative is funded by the Department of Biotechnology. The sample collection was done in the form of blood samples and phenotype data, for example, height, weight, blood pressure, etc. And we sequenced 10,074 genomes. It required the collaboration of 20 institutions, including the Center for Brain Research, which is part of the Indian Institute of Science, Bengaluru. And it required the diversity in sampling also. For example, 83 population groups were taken up, 30 of them were tribal and 53 were non-tribal from 100 plus geographical locations. There was a 3 to 6 parent-child pair also per group to study the de novo mutations, the newer ones, and there was the exclusion of the ancient Andaman population also. Now, what are the key findings of this report? One, it has observed 180 million mutations. 130 million mutations out of the 180 are in the known sex chromosomes, that is in the autosomes, and 50 million mutations are in the sex chromosomes, that is the X chromosome and Y chromosome. It traces the evolutionary history, therefore, due to endogamy also, that is marriage within the same groups as well. Now, what is the significance of it? There are distinct genetic variations due to centuries of endogamy which is practiced in India, marriage within the same group, within the same social group, that is, and it has led to the population specific disease mutations also. It will address the Genome India project will address the underrepresentation of the Indian genomes in the global studies. We will be able to ensure that public health policies are specifically targeted at the target population groups, and will be able to develop the precision medicines also using the genome sequencing data which will be tailored to the Indian genetics. We will be able to develop affordable diagnostic tools as well to ensure the early detection and early diagnosis of various diseases, and will be able to prevent and manage the genetic disorders as well. Now, the next article is related to the Mandamus against the President. This is important in GS2 under the topic Powers, Functions and Responsibilities of Various Constitutional Bodies in India. Before coming to the article, let's discuss two provisions in the Indian Constitution. One, the Article 201, through which the bills are reserved for the consideration of the President. It says that when a bill is reserved by the governor of a state for the consideration of the President shall declare either that he assents to the bill or he withholds assent, and he can also return the bill for reconsideration to the state legislature also. What is of note here is that there is no timeline within which the President has to take a decision regarding the bill which has been reserved by the governor for the consideration of the President. Now the Supreme Court has given a timeline that the President has to take a decision within 3 months. Another provision is Article 143. Which provides for the power of the President to consult the Supreme Court. It provides for the advisory jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has observed in the recent case that the President ought to refer such bills which have been reserved for his consideration in case they require the interpretation of the Constitution or the constitutionality of the law proposed by the state government for the advisory opinion of the Supreme Court using Article 143. What does Article 143 say? It says that if at any time it appears to the President that a question of law or fact has arisen or is likely to arise, which is of such nature or such public importance that it is expedient to obtain the opinion of the Supreme Court, then he may refer the question to the court for the consideration, and the court may report to the President its opinion. So in such case, the Supreme Court may or may not give its opinion. It's not obligatory for the Supreme Court to give its opinion. But the another advisory jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, which is there under clause 2 of Article 143, provides that the President, notwithstanding anything in the proviso of Article 131, which is related to the pre-constitution treaties, covenants, agreements that is, which were entered into by India before the coming into force of the constitution, in that case, if the president refers a dispute for the opinion of the Supreme Court under Article 143 subclause 2, then the Supreme Court shall give its report, give its opinion to the president. In this case, it is mandatory for the Supreme Court to give its opinion to the president. Now coming to the article, the court has observed that Article 143 can be invoked for the president to seek the opinion of the Supreme Court where the governor has reserved the bill for the consideration of the president on the ground of perceived unconstitutionality, and the president ought to do it. Article 143 therefore deals with this power of the president. Now, the Supreme Court although has acknowledged that it is not mandatory for the government to accept the opinion which is given by the Supreme Court, but it has high persuasive value. Whatever opinion that the Supreme Court gives, it has high persuasive value, and it should ordinarily be accepted by the legislature and executive. And merely because the jurisdiction under Article 143 is not binding, it does not undermine the principles used by this court to determine the constitutionality of the bill. The president's recourse to Article 143, if the president resorts to this, will also ensure that there won't be any apprehensions of bias or mala fide in the central government's approach in case bills are reserved by the governor for the consideration of the president. The court has also observed where a bill has been reserved majorly on the grounds of not being in consonance with the constitutional principles and it requires the interpretation of the constitutionality, then the executive is supposed to exercise restraint, because it is expected that the union executive should not assume the role of the courts. It is upon the courts to decide the constitutionality. Determining whether a bill is ultra vires or intra vires is the domain of the judiciary, of the court. This is not the function of the executive or legislature as observed by the court. Therefore, it should be done. The constitutionality where it has to be tested, the bill should be referred using Article 143. Here the hands of the executive are tied when engaging with purely legal issues in the bill, and the only constitutional courts have the prerogative to determine the constitutionality of the bill. Also, it is all the more necessary because there is no mechanism in the Indian Constitution whereby the governor can seek the opinion or advice regarding the constitutionality. The very same constitutional obligation cast on the president is provided in Article 154H of the Constitution in Sri Lanka also, where if the governor is of the opinion that it is an unconstitutional bill, then it is referred to the president. Then the president has to refer to the Supreme Court in Sri Lanka. A similar provision is there in the Constitution of Kiribati also, whereby it has to be referred to the Supreme Court in Kiribati under section 66 of its constitution. The court also referred to the recommendations of the Sarkaria and Punchi Commission, which had recommended that the president should seek the opinion of the Supreme Court under Article 143 in case the bill which has been reserved by the governor is apprehended to be patently unconstitutional. Although the Attorney General observed that the president was not heard in this case, the court should have heard the president also before deciding upon the powers of the president in the constitution. Now, the next article is related to global carbon tax on shipping. This is important in GS2 under the topic bilateral, regional and global groupings and agreements affecting India's interests, and in GS3 as well under Indian economy. Before coming to the article, let's discuss a few basics regarding the carbon tax. How is it imposed? A fee is usually charged upon the carbon emissions. A CO2 fee is charged if the natural gas, coal or the mineral oil products are used. And due to this carbon tax, the prices for the fossil fuels, the carbon intensive products increases. And this ensures that the climate friendly products, the climate friendly sustainable options, for example, sustainable transport options, they become more competitive. And the fee so collected, it can be distributed among the citizens. In particular, the low-income individuals and families profit from the per capita payments also. This climate dividend flows back into the economic cycle, and this ensures that the climate change does not happen as rapidly. How does it work? There can be a carbon tax imposition or the carbon cap and the trading of the carbon credits also. Who does it affect? One, it will affect the energy producers. They will pay for the greenhouse gas emissions by their operations, and they will also seek solutions for reduction of their emissions by employing innovative lower carbon technologies. The end consumers will be benefiting. How? They will be paying more for the carbon intensive goods, but they will be going for then less energy consuming and more energy efficient and lower carbon energy products also, which will further lead to lesser carbon emissions in future. Now coming to the article, this global carbon tax on shipping agreement has been approved by 63 countries, including India, China and Brazil. It was adopted at the headquarters of the International Maritime Organization in London. It will be effective from 2028. From 2028, the ships must use lower emission fuels or they will have to pay a pollution fee. Therefore, this is in line with the polluter pays principle. What are the objectives from the agreement? One, it will reduce the maritime greenhouse gas emissions. This will generate revenues also simultaneously. The revenue generation of up to $40 billion is expected by 2030. These funds, they won't be used for the broader climate finance. They will be used only for decarbonization of shipping, only for that purpose. Therefore, there are certain criticisms also. For example, only 10% emission reduction will happen by 2030, whereas the IMO's target is 20%. Likewise, there is no allocation for the development of the nation's climate finance needs. There is opposition by the oil-rich nations also. For example, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Russia, Venezuela, because if the usage of oil is reduced, then the oil exporting nations, they will be at a loss. And USA also did not participate in the negotiations or the agreement. There are the concerns of various developing countries also. For example, over 60 countries from the Pacific, Caribbean, Africa and Central America, they have demanded the revenue sharing for climate finance from the funds so collected. And Tuvalu has also observed that there is a lack of transparency in the implementation of the agreement and there are weaker incentives for the cleaner fuels. Now the next article is related to the Kathak dance. This is important in GS1 under the topic Indian culture, salient aspects of art forms, literature and architecture from ancient to modern times. Now before coming to the article, let's discuss the background of Kathak also. It started as an oral tradition by the Kathakars, the storytellers. It was narrated in the form of stories. The stories were picked from epics, myths and legends. Later on, it incorporated the gestures also. It had the influence of Bhakti movement as well. The Vaishnavite cult and the Bhakti movement, it introduced new lyrics and the musical forms in the Kathak. The Ras Leela, which was practiced in the Braj region, it combined music, dance and narrative. There was the influence of the Mughals also. It transformed Kathak. For example, it was taken from the temples. Earlier it was practiced in the temples to the royal courts or the darbars. The performance also changed to highly stylized entertainment form. The greater emphasis during the Mughal era was placed on the nritya, that is expression, and bhav, that is mood. The Persian costumes were adopted and the dance styles also had the Persian influence. The 19th century was the golden age for Kathak under Nawab Wajid Ali Shah, who belonged to the Lucknow Gharana. Now, what is the performance structure of Kathak? The technique is to maintain a balanced body weight. The basic stance is a straight posture. One hand is usually above the head and the other hand is at the shoulder level. There are no sharp bends or deflections. Rather, the movements are sophisticated. There are gliding movements. The footwork is a sophisticated footwork which focuses upon pure dance, that is nrit. And the movements are gliding movements of neck, eyebrows and the wrists in thought. The performance has the aspects of thought, which is the introductory soft movement, Amad, which is the formal entry, Salami, which is the salutation, and then the rhythmic syllables and the art of storytelling through that. The Kathak includes the mime and narratives also in the form of Naritya and Abhinaya, that short stories are told from Krishna's life set to the Drupad music. Jugalbandi is also done, which is the competitive interplay between the dancer and the drummer. The other forms of Kathak include Thumri, Bhajan, Dadra, etc., whereby poetic lines are also interpreted with gestures. The famous exponents of Kathak include the Birju Maharaj, Lachu Maharaj, Sitara Devi and Damayanti Joshi. This can be asked in prelims. Now coming to the article, the Kathak does not have to depend upon Katha and Sahitya only. This was the observation of the Kathak exponent Kumudini Lakhia, who unfortunately passed away. And she used to wonder why art couldn't exist only for the art's sake. Her question about dissociating Katha and Kathak at the time was sawing at the roots of the art form that was so entrenched in the idea of storytelling, because that is the main focus, that is Krishna, Radha, Shiva, Parvati storytelling among others. Now, the next article is related to the shifting time of maximum rainfall in India. This is important in GS3 under the topic environment. The spatial rainfall in India has been changing. The quantum of rainfall per day in certain parts of India has increased in the decade from 2011 to 2020 as per a recent study. For example, the west central part of India has received 2 mm more rainfall per day from 2011 to 2020. Not only the west central area, but also the Indo-Gangetic plains and the southernmost parts of India, they have also received more rainfall in the decade of 2011 to 2020 per day. But the eastern region has received slightly less rainfall, that is lesser by 1 mm per day during the period 2011 to 2020. The slight increase in the daily rainfall over the west central region appears to be linked to the increased vegetation. And there has been an increase in the soil moisture content also over the west central India. Both of them have increased to increase in the precipitation and rainfall. The peak time of maximum rainfall in the Indo-Gangetic plain has also advanced by 2 to 4 hours, and in the west central India, the peak time of maximum rainfall has been delayed by 1 to 2 hours. The aerosol loading is also high in the Indo-Gangetic plains as compared to the west central region. Now, how have these factors influenced the rainfall changes in India? The article notices that the increase in vegetation and soil moisture has increased rainfall. How? The more vegetation in west central India leads to higher transpiration, which leads to increase in rainfall. Likewise, the soil moisture also has a positive correlation with the rainfall. In the eastern India, if you observe, the soil moisture has declined, therefore there is reduced rainfall. Likewise, the aerosol loading has also had the impact. In the Indo-Gangetic plains, the aerosol loading is higher. Therefore, there is early peak rainfall as it absorbs, scatters the sunlight and it alters the atmospheric stability. In the west central India, the aerosol loading is lower and therefore the peak rainfall is delayed. Now, what are the implications of these findings? One, this is picked up from the GS map and ISRO data, a collaboration between ISRO and the Japanese JAXA. It provides the high resolution rainfall mapping. These findings will aid in the climate modeling, aid in the monsoon prediction also. And there is a global similar finding also. For example, similar aerosol rainfall interactions have been observed in Beijing, as there the rainfall peaks 6 hours earlier on the polluted days. Thank you.